Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to Colonial Williamsburg, the Cabinetmaker shop. Today we're going to go in and explore and see a little bit about what is actually happening here in the 20th century in a colonial cabinet shop. This is the Anthony Hay Cabinetmaker shop in Colonial Williamsburg. Now, if you're into historical woodworking, this is Mecca. This is kind of the epicenter of all the historical study and what is going on in here. So today we're actually going to go down these stairs into the back door and see a little behind the scenes and what is happening in the shop. And this is kind of one of the funny things. I've never had a chance to go inside before. I've always just been able to look in through the window and see it from the outside. So let's actually explore not just the wood pile, which that is really cool, but everything that's happening inside.
Hi, I'm Bill Pavlak. We're here in the Anthony Hay Cabinet Shop. I'm the master cabinet maker here at Colonial Williamsburg. Our mission in the shop really is to learn and to teach. We study original pieces of furniture. We get pretty up close to them. We look for tool marks. We look for anything that can tell us a story about how this thing might have been made. And then we come back to the shop, come to our benches, and try to make that piece the same way we think the original was made. If we see a technique that doesn't quite line up with our thinking, that's okay. We're going to try this other way and see what we can learn from that. You have a great diversity of approaches in the 18th century. Imagine this is a world where everybody is learning the trade from somebody who learned it from somebody and so forth. And so in different shops and in different regions, you're going to have slight variations. Just kind of like we have today. Talk about sharpening or cut and dovetail joints, everybody has an opinion. We don't have to suffer through their arguments about those things in the 18th century, but we can see often some of the differences in how they approach things. And so our job is kind of honor the costume in a sense and try to figure out not how I would do it, but how did they do it, and what can I learn from that? Hopefully we can teach people about that as well.
So this is a reproduction of an Apothecary chest, which is kind of an 18th century medicine cabinet, really. It's made entirely out of mahogany. And so it's really, two of us have been working on it. Jeremy has done most of the drawer work with these tiny little dovetails in there. The small end is about a saw kerf wide, and the big end of the pin is about a 16th. You got to have new tools made for that kind of thing. So he's done a lot of work on the drawers, and then I made most of the case, which is designed to hold about salt shaker sized bottles of various things, and slightly bigger in the top. And then the back as well, the piece is missing at stores right now, the back as well has room for even more bottles. So this piece is about 2/3 of the way done. We need to add some hardware to it, and the top that closes and the doors that close as well, and then apply some finish, and that'll be done. So about 150 or so hours of labor in it, entirely hand tooled out of mahogany.
Wow, only 150?
Yeah, well, it's most of our time with our work here is hand processing lumber, and so when the dimensions are smaller, when you're making something so physically small, it goes a lot quicker than making something big. As dumb as that sounds, it's true.
So we've got this recessed portion on here, and that is carved out. So how exactly did you go about doing that?
So there's a couple of ways you can carve this out. One way would be to in order to remove all this material would be to use a tool called a router plane. You can see here this blade protrudes down below the surface. You set that distance to where you want, and then you can actually ride over everything, and that will remove material down to the depth where you want it to be. That's not what I used for this particular process, just because this is such a small panel. It was a lot easier to do with carving tools. So in this case, after laying out where I wanted the field to be, laying out this shape and this profile, I could take some carving tools, go around the entire outside, and stamp that down in there and work my way around with a couple of different tools. Once all that outside edge is stamped, you can then take those same tools, come back in, remove a little bit of material, just kind of like a little wedge out along that stamped edge. The next step would be then to take a slightly larger tool, but a very, very shallow curve to it. I go across the grain, and really I'm just tearing out, shoveling out material down to approximately the depth I want. Never really measuring it per se, I'm just judging it by eye. It's something that looks pleasant. That leaves kind of a nice scalloped surface You obviously don't want that final surface. You want it to be nice and smooth. So in order to smooth it out, you can use a card scraper to get in and do that pretty simply. And this one was an old saw blade that I sharpened and turned into a card scraper. Just take that, you can scrape across there. That's going to take those ridges off just like you would with a hand plane to knock down the ridges. Go across there, work its way down, get everything flat and clean and even. Eventually that will be your finished surface.
So on this one, it's also carved in,
Right.
but this one's far more detailed and much larger. How'd you go about doing that?
Yeah, so with this, there's two ways to do it in the 18th century that we know of. One is to spin this on the lathe, on the faceplate, and you can turn out most of this and come in and carve the corners. When that was done, you'll see telltale screw holes on the underside of the tabletop that show you that's how it was done. So no such holes on the original of this. So for me here, there's a lot of carving, a lot of use of the router plane, but again, you have this issue of how do you actually support the router plane if you only have a raised edge around the outer edge. So what I did, there's different ways to do this, but I basically carved a ring in the middle of this. I left a ring standing up here and another one circle standing right here, and was just carving these trenches around that. That gave, imagine there's a raised area here, gave my router plane something to ride on. So raised area here, router plane can ride on that. So I basically was creating what looked like a 3D bullseye or target. Once I got a couple of shavings above my final depth, since this isn't the cleanest cutting tool, I then came in and very aggressively gouged out the raised areas using the lowered area as a reference, and then I had enough room to get a normal smooth plane in here to clean most of it up and could carve and scrape in these little inlets all around the carved area. So a tremendous amount of time just to work all of that down. This is 30 inches in diameter. It's a single board.
Okay, I have to break in here for a moment because he just casually mentioned that's a single board. 36-inch wide, old-growth mahogany. Okay, let's get back to the video.
So you're worrying about stability that whole time too, and just the nature of our jobs here where we're talking and working helped probably keep this somewhat stable because I could only work on it incrementally, and then carving it, quite a bit of carved work. You have these two patterns, the C scroll and then the leaves with the S scrolls. They repeat 8 times around the table each. The big challenge here is the grain is different in every one. So usually when you carve something 8 times, the grain is fairly consistent through it. But here, it's like your 9 o'clock and your 3 o'clock patterns are absolutely the opposite from 12 and 6 o'clock. So everything that's with the grain here is now going across the grain there, and vice versa. So that kept you on your toes, throughout this. Kept me on my toes at least throughout this process.
All that work not to just carve and apply it to a flat surface.
Right. Which we'll do that often enough. But typically on these circular tables, it's usually all carved out of one piece.
So after finding out how they're doing what they're doing and what their mission is, it was kind of interesting to walk around the shop and see how they had everything laid out. Where were all the tools? How did they store them? Were they in toolboxes or cabinets or on shelves in the wall? And that is interesting to see how they were actually studying the historical ways of how would it have been done and trying different methods. There's 100 different ways to do something, and it was very interesting to see how even in historical terms there is no one traditional way. There were hundreds of different traditions, and they actually get to experiment and play with different traditions and try different methods. And it's a great way to learn and see different things. Also, there was a man who actually makes harpsichords in the shop, so it isn't just cabinets. But man, look at that wood pile. Oh, but really, there's a lot more going on in Colonial Williamsburg than just the cabinet shop. The rest of Williamsburg is honestly just as interesting. It is really, really cool to see how everything worked together, how different trades worked together and worked. And this was an off day, so there wasn't a whole lot going on, and I would love to come back on a weekend. This is the tin shop where they were doing the tin reproductions and actually making some of that. The blacksmith shop was incredible and huge and was a fantastic place to learn. They had the bakery and the kitchens that were making food that was, I would love to try some of that. The outdoor kitchen where you could cook on that was fantastic. We went around back to the blacksmith. Check out the bellows on there. All of this historical reproductions, and they're actually making things for the rest of Colonial Williamsburg. So they need a hinge. The black shop makes it out. You need an adze. They make it out. All of the other things. This lock was absolutely incredible, seeing how all of these pieces were made in the shop and all of them come together. And seeing these reproductions of antiques and learning about how it was done. This is actually the leather shop, and he was talking about how it was owned by the government and run by the government and supplied by the government. And I thought that was kind of a almost a communist thing. But a lot of it was interesting to actually go and learn about the history and the background to it. This is the wheelwright shop, and they were making carriages, and this was, I would love to have seen this in work. It wasn't there. The coal, of course, for the blacksmith shop. Keep off the coal. I had to tell the kids to keep off the coal. Yeah. But there's so much more to this. It was a huge place, and its entire town focused on this. Some of the flowers and gardens were interesting to see, some of the historical flowers, because we have changed them so much over the years. It was nice to see what did they look like back 700 years ago. And then check that out with the door closer. Just interesting things like this. All of the gates had these weights on them to pull the gate closed so that animals didn't get out. Interesting little designs like that you never would have thought about. And it was just beautiful to walk around and see everything. Here we're back over at the carpenter's shop where they were doing bricks and other things like that. And of course we have Cedar Shakes. They weren't actually making the Cedar Shakes because it was off day. There was only a couple guys there working on it. But it was interesting to talk to the kids and say, what are these? And the kids had to think through it and figure out how they were used and what does that actually mean and how did they come about. But can you imagine making all those shakes? And you need far more than that for a full building. It's one of those things that you just almost always had someone making shakes in a place like this. One of the things they were actually looking at was how was the historical method of putting a dormer on? How was this done? And so they have this mock-up where they're making a dormer and roof and figuring out the methodologies, and they came up with a couple different things on that. Fascinating to see that. But then this is the rest of the shop where kind of the timber framing would be done. He was actually working on a set of stairs that day. But over in the far corner is the pit. And this is I want to do this one of these days. I would love to have gone and gotten closer to it, but I didn't have a contact to actually go in and look into the pit. But imagine one person standing on top of that beam with a saw, another person down in the pit below running the saw. So one guy standing up high, one guy down below getting all the dust on, but the guy up top has to pull this saw up. And there is the pit saw. A massive beast. That would be an incredible torture, but it would be fascinating to see. So I wish I could have been there in the day it was running, but I'll have to go back again. And we will be back in the future. So if you're ever near Colonial Williamsburg, swing on by. And all of the trees, there were some really beautiful oaks and live oaks. The grounds to the governor's mansion, just absolutely beautiful and a lot of fun, if you can't tell that. And we actually did have an interesting time in the garden because, how do you keep rabbits out when you don't have chicken wire? And they actually had all these little glass planters that they would put over them at night and then uncover them in the day when they're working at it. Kind of interesting. And of course, poppies, because you need poppies. Yes. Fascinating all around and well worth the trip and well worth the fun to go learn. So if you're nearby, definitely swing into Colonial Williamsburg. It is 3 or 4 days worth of pure fun. So I hope you liked that little walk through Williamsburg. That was a lot of fun. I really want to go back there, and I'd love to spend some more time in the cabinet shop. I only had a little bit of time. They're actually getting ready for a live. If you want to see it, the Colonial Williamsburg Facebook page, every Tuesday, they do a live video with one of the trades, and they actually talk through things on Trades Tuesday. Really kind of cool. I'll try and leave a link to that down below. And also, I do want to go back there sometime and do a lot more detail and actually try and get in touch with someone at the carpenter's yard and have a little bit of fun there. I'm hoping to get back and actually spend maybe a couple days there as well and do some more detailed items. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If there's something particularly you'd like to see for the next time we go there, let me know that. If you do have any other thoughts, comments, questions, snide remarks, weird ideas, throw them down below. I do read through all the comments and I get to answer as many of them as I possibly can. Also, I want to say thank you to everyone who clicked that little like button down there, the little check mark, like, thumbs up thing. That really does help out the video. Thank you for that. If you like it, share it. And leave me a comment down below. Also, everyone scrolling over the side, they are patrons on Patreon. I want to say thank you to them and members who've clicked that little join button. You guys are the ones keeping the lights on and keeping this channel going. If you'd like to find out more about that, you can find information in the doobly-doo down below. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Yeah, okay. To-do list. Buy puffy shirt. Ooh, one of those vests with all the buttons down it. That's what I need now. Oh, and knickers. I need knickers.